Hi everyone, my name is Alexandria Severa. I'm the admin assistant for the Humanities department here at UNCA Asheville. And today I'm interviewing the director and upcoming graduate Jeremiah Myer, director of the art piece Between Walls and Windows. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. It's good to get you in here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I recently saw your piece and I was absolutely blown away. So
Thank you.
I was really glad we could get you in for an interview. So you're an upcoming graduate.
Yes.
What department are you?
I am in the studio art department with a concentration in painting.
Concentration in
Yeah.
painting. I noticed you used painting quite a lot in Between Walls and Windows. There was a absolutely wonderful segment where you would have these, I called them tapestries, but I don't know what term is more accurate, but there's basically these, for people in the audience, these segments of paintings that were hung on was it like a clothesline?
It was a track system for a closet door.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
I was figuring out how to make that, and I was sort of like, I found out later that I was designing something that already exists, and then when I found it just at Home Depot, it was like such a weight off my back that it's there. It exists. Yeah.
That is honestly really resourceful. I mean, that's just like a great use of. It's one of those things that, like, in the process of creation, you find fun and interesting solutions to things.
Yeah.
What made you, or what kind of drew you to that part of the piece, those paintings?
Well, I'm a painter,
Mm-hmm.
and I also love music and I love theater, and I wanted to find a way to sort of combine it all, but still make it like a really painting forward experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a tricky balance while actually painting, because like I just love the materiality of paint, but I also have to think about it from the point of view of an audience. Like, you're not going to be able to step up to it and see it. So yeah, just a lot of like getting close to it and getting really far from it.
That reminds me of something that we learn they have hammered into quite extensively in theater, where you're acting for an audience that's sitting far away, not right up next to you. So you have to have exaggerated kind of motions or think about how it's looked from that far of an angle. But you're an upcoming graduate.
Yes.
And are you nervous about graduating, or maybe I should ask, how do you feel about graduating?
It's been hitting me these past few weeks, just how lucky I am to be like in an institution like this. There's so many resources. Like, I have my cohort, and of course I won't necessarily lose my cohort completely once I graduate, but there's a structure built around this community, and we have like weekly critique sessions with everybody, and I'm nervous about losing that. And then also just the facilities, like a lot of the set was built at the STEAM studio, and it's just so nice to have all of that equipment and machinery, and I'm nervous about losing that once I graduate.
It's something you can't really get on an online school, or even like trade school or so on and so forth. It's something that's very specific to the four-year university, that set community.
Yes.
I definitely am in a similar boat where I found my anthropology cohort quite valuable, even if we didn't have like critique sessions, which I think what are those like? I'm actually kind of curious, because
it's really intimidating, especially like in your first few years. They kind of launch us into it softly. Like, remember the format in my foundations classes was a compliment sandwich. Like, you would say something you liked about what you're seeing, and then you would say something that you noticed that might need to change, or just give your perspective on like what you might consider to be a flaw, or consider something that the person making it might not see, and then you finish with a compliment or an observation. But as you move into it and you get into the higher courses, it can be a little tough when you have a whole class looking at this thing you've poured time into. But at the end of the day, it's like so wonderful and so helpful, because especially in the painting department, there's not a huge sense of collaboration. We each have our own station where we work, and it's just you looking at what you're creating for days. So it's really helpful to have like a fresh set of eyes at the end of that.
So Did you have to, did the, Between Walls and Windows, did that go through a critique process as well, or the paintings in there?
Yeah.
Interesting. If you don't mind me saying, what were people's thoughts on your work? If you were comfortable sharing.
No, yeah.
I know it's kind of sometimes a vulnerable
Yeah.
space.
In retrospect, I don't think I did a great job of explaining exactly what I was trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the critiques were about the paintings themselves, which was, helpful, super helpful, especially in an art department. But it was really tricky to convey the other elements that I wanted to bring into the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like after it was performed, a lot of the feedback I got was like, I had no clue that this is what it was going to amount to.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of validation actually after people telling me that they really understood what I was trying to achieve, which was really nice.
There's a quote by the late great David Lynch, where when people in interviews would come up and ask him like, "Oh, what's your art about?" or "What is your or even during production meetings, they're like, "So what are you trying to say?" And he would always say, "Well, stop asking me questions about it. The thing is the thing.
Yeah,
the art is the art. It speaks for itself." And I can understand that a lot sometimes. And so we're talking about Through Walls and Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to give just like a brief overview of how you would explain the project, or how you would explain the performance, just to our listening audience?
Yeah. I guess, like I said earlier, at least in my mind, it's a really painting forward experience, but it's centered around this really narrative album that's performed live. It goes through 10 scenes, 10 different songs, and the purpose of the music is to really propel that storyline. And the paintings function more as world building and kind of making these environments that the songs talk about tangible. I guess overall, the narrative is really about my experience growing up in Greensboro and the really specific things to that city that I felt influenced, who I became and how I became. And then to zoom out even more, I guess the topics that it's sort of dealing with through this narrative is beginning with like an awareness of the body and the possibility that your body can be watched.
Yeah.
And then you start to anticipate this gaze. And then towards the end of the performance, the main character ends up sort of flipping that gaze and reproducing it.
Yeah. I noticed that as well. Something I thought was very poignant about the piece, even though it's not really something that's touched on directly in the piece, is something very similar to, I guess, the experience of growing up in the world, or in the becoming stage of social media, in the world of social media, that glaze, that perception. I really felt a lot of kinship with a lot of the themes of the piece, especially with like in regards to privacy, cars as a space of privacy, or your bedroom as a kid as a place of privacy. I was kind of curious then, because there was a part in the work that was that I got a lot out of, just because I felt a little seen by it, that touched on a kind of mature, maybe not, I don't want to say like mature theme, but a very maybe hard to talk about theme, if you can kind of get what I'm getting at. Whenever you're in the studio or writing, how do you find the balance of, or is there a balance that you try to strike, or is there, what kind of conversations are you having in your critiques and with yourself when you want to talk about maybe that, you can see what I'm trying to what kind of question I'm trying to angle towards. How do you find that ground between a broad audience or a audience and what your art's trying to say?
Yeah, that's always tricky. I guess when I was initially sort of writing the narrative, I had a really clear intention of how I wanted the audience to feel. But as the piece grew and more elements started coming in, I kind of realized I had to let go of controlling the experience of this. And I kind of made this compromise. If I just present my story and present it in a way that wasn't super literal, and make it these sort of vignettes that add up to something bigger, that leaves a lot more room for the audience to bring in their own experiences into it. So it's a really weird negotiation.
Yeah.
Because it's something so personal, but just based on conversations I've had, it seems like a lot of the scenes are really universal. So just having the audience sort of meet me halfway and bring their own lives into my own life was how that kind of went. Yeah.
Is there anything, I guess, that you think in your mind that you think that you would do differently if you were to maybe start the whole? Because whenever I create something, I know my first thought is always, here's what I could have done differently if I was to do it again. I don't think you can ever really do the same piece ever again. Once it's there, it's there. But yeah, I was kind of just curious.
You know, watching the footage back, I wish there were more actual people in front of the paintings. The format of the paintings is something that's kind of new to me. I usually paint like pretty small images that you can observe close up, but there was something really interesting that happened when I started making these scenes where the figures in the scenes start to mirror my own proportions. And there's this weird spatial collapse that happens when a real body passes in front of these like illusionistic bodies. So I think I would play with that more, like just creating more levels of depth on the stage and having the painting sort of be this, you know, flat plane that the actors can cross in front of.
I think stage is a great medium for playing around with space, because you already have the upstage, downstage, and then you also have a whole audience. I've been in a few productions of where people have played around with space, and it's quite enjoyable. I really liked how you used the sets. The sets were very tactile. The sets were very well constructed. I also liked how you used projection. And literal projection and metaphor projection was something that the production played around with a lot. So you're a painter by trade is what you would say, but there was a lot of really good and well-designed sets. Did you do that on your own? What kind of help did you enlist? What was that process like, designing sets on top of painting? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, well, I built all of the sets alone. It's kind of a problem I'm working through. I feel like it's not mine if I didn't make it. And you see all these like big names in the art world now. They have like huge studios with hundreds of assistants, and that kind of idea turns me off of making. Like, I'm really stubborn and I want to be, you know, fully hands-on throughout the whole process. So when I got to some of the video stuff, I reached out to a friend, Elias Shack, who's in new media. And that was a really nice point of collaboration when things started moving beyond my scope. But yeah, the actual set construction was really fun. I love carpentry. And, you know, I was in the Steam studio and I had access to all these tools and all this space. And I feel like I got really lucky in terms of the number of times I had to make these sets. Like, it was kind of just first go. Just keep on building upon it, and it all sort of came together.
I like towards the end when you destroy the one bedroom set. I thought was quite cathartic. I imagine it felt the same for you.
It did.
Where did that arise in the production process? I'm going to build this thing and then I'm going to destroy it.
That idea came to me 2 weeks before the production. And I was struggling to find a way to end this thing. And for those of you who haven't seen the production, the second to last scene, this character enters the bedroom, and the space is set up in a way that makes it really feel like it's not his, and the way he moves through it
Yeah.
is not how you would move through your own room. He's sort of searching through things, looking at pictures on the wall, opening drawers, reading books. And then he finds this diary, and he reads it. And then he leaves the room exactly how he found it. He puts the diary back where it was. And I guess after that, I really see the room folding in on itself as a sort of metaphor for censorship.
Yeah.
Like after this violation occurs, the room is censoring itself. It becomes illegible. You can't read it anymore.
It becomes alien.
Yeah, exactly.
Becomes not familiar.
Yeah.
That's a very familiar experience. A place that was once familiar becoming alien or feeling alien. Definitely have similar feelings about my hometown and my home, my room, my place. But so you're from Greensboro, and this work is, as you said, very heavily tied to Greensboro.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious then, maybe to shift subjects. What brought you to, number one, Asheville? What brought you to UNCA Asheville? That's a fun question I like to ask a lot of folks.
Yeah, well, I was touring a lot of schools, not just in North Carolina, and I guess I was really attracted to the size, and on top of that, the number of faculty in the art department.
Yeah.
There's so few students and so many faculty that you get a lot of attention, and you really get to know these people. And also the facilities are great here in the art department, and just the student work that I was seeing when I toured was really great. And also it was cheaper than my other options, so that influenced it for sure.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience when I was looking for places, where my parents said, "Oh, you can go anywhere in the state, or you can go anywhere, just somewhere in the state." So I picked.
Yeah.
I'm originally from the Outer Banks area, so so you're coming up on the end of your 4 years. I'm graduating soon. Like a lot of students, you went through the Humanities core. I'm kind of curious then, what was your experience like in the Humanities program here at Asheville? I would definitely say it's different than a lot of Humanities programs, definitely because of those class sizes. So I'm just kind of curious if you had anything that was notable from your experience in the Humanities.
Yeah, I guess I was going through this sort of crisis my sophomore year where I was like so convinced that I had nothing to say. And I was like, should I just be going to vocational school? Like, I'm really interested in learning how to work with materials and build things, but I don't think I have anything to put into it. So I was sure that I was going to be like an artist assistant or work on some sort of crew that builds things for other people, like some sort of fabrication studio. But I guess through the humanities courses, I sort of learned about the history of narrative, and it was just so intriguing to me. And I guess I gained a little confidence the more I read things that I could like write my own things,
Write your own
and
things.
sort of, be in charge of why I'm making what I'm making.
Yeah. Were there any works that really spoke to you, or any texts that really grabbed your attention?
Yeah. This sort of came to me later, but in the Bhagavad Gita, which I think I read my junior year, I'm not quite sure, there's this quote about labor, and it's just been like, it's been running through my mind the whole time I've been building this project, and I'm going to paraphrase. It's something like, you are not entitled to the fruits of your labor, but the labor itself. And that that changed my whole outlook on what I was making and my motivations behind it. And that just reinforced my love for making things and working on a team, and the sort of the collaborative labor that's involved in something like what I did.
There's a very similar, the enjoyment and the fulfillment is the work itself.
Yeah.
Is another way of rephrasing that.
Yeah.
There's a very similar quote by in the social theory class you have to take in anthropology. That's attached to the humanities core. You read the 1844 manuscripts by Marx, and there's a very similar quote, which I think is interesting because entirely two different frameworks of thought, entirely two different time periods, geographical locations, but there's a quote in there that's basically talking about how like the species being that is man finds itself in taking the natural world and imbuing himself or itself or their self into it, changing it. The labor is a self-fulfilling process. I always find that very motivating as well.
Yeah.
So the humanities program, I would say, is a very multidisciplinary program, and it draws on a lot of students and professors from a lot of different departments on campus.
Yeah.
For lectures, for the actual faculty, for all students at one point had to go through it. In the art world, do you find that kind of multidisciplinary thinking, or because I know, for example, you talked about how collaboration is sometimes not something that happens quite often in painting, but do you see yourself drawing upon frameworks of thought and thinking outside of the art world oftentimes when you're in the process of creating?
I think so. A lot of the conceptual backbone of this project was, introduced to me by a friend who is a philosophy major. It was weird. I was dealing with all of these themes surrounding observation, and a friend introduced Foucault to me, and I had never heard of him. I didn't take any philosophy classes, but the more I started reading, the more it felt like a sort of message in a bottle to me.
Yeah.
Guess I'll give a little context. The performance opens in a reconstruction of my childhood bedroom. Super weird architecture. It used to be the patio. The previous owners put walls and a ceiling up. So one of the walls is what was the exterior of the house. And there's this window that looks in from the dining room into my bedroom, super high up on the wall, like so high up that I can't see into it from my bed. And then another window from my dad's office that I also couldn't see into. And when I started reading about Foucault's Panopticon, it just made so much sense, and it brought back to me how I felt when I was in that room, and it helped explain why I felt the way I did. There's like always this possibility of an observer, but you can't see them. And because you can't see them, you sort of internalize that observer.
Yeah.
And you're watching yourself, and it's this weird feedback loop.
You become your own observer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of, having it in writing clarified a lot of things. Where it was like a lightning strike on sand or something.
Yeah.
Kind of flowery language.
Yeah.
So you're going to be graduating soon. And indeed in a few weeks. What does life look like after UNCA for you?
I don't know. It's so vague and fuzzy, but I know where I'm going. I'm going to be moving to New York in August. I was lucky to receive an Elizabeth Greenshields grant, and I'm going to be using that money for studio rent for a year. So I know a place. I know the place I'm going to, but the details past that are a little vague. I know I want to continue working in theater somehow.
Yeah.
I just love the collaborative arts so much, and I feel like, I was really missing that in my time here. So I'd love to become part of a team that makes, productions similar to the one I put on come to life.
Nice. That sounds very, if it's anything like the one that you just put on, I imagine you have many fantastic performances ahead of you. I had a few more questions. So you had a band.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that it has an album, the experimental album with Between Walls and Windows. Were those already written songs, or did you write those, or were those written in collaboration?
So all the music was composed by my friend Ruben Akins. He lives in Austin, but he was the pedal steel player during the performance. I wrote the lyrics, I brought them to him, and we sort of worked together. He's so talented. He knows way more about actually producing music than I do. So we sort of worked together to discover what sort of how to abstract the lyrics into just sounds. And then once we sort of got that structure down, we would figure out how to, reincorporate the lyrics into it.
Abstract the lyrics into just sound. I'm kind of curious by what that looks like, or what you mean by that, if you don't mind.
We actually did these little exercises where I would give him like a word or a feeling or a situation, and he would sit down at the piano and try to express that. And then we brought it back to the motifs that kind of run throughout the narrative, and it kind of went from there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time for today, but is there anything else you'd want to say to aspiring artists, people in the humanities, students in the humanities program, people that maybe need that confidence that it gave you for telling your own stories?
Well, I think it's really important to be looking at art, reading books, whatever your medium is, consume that medium just as much as you're making it. I've sort of had this collection of like 5 or 6 artists that I always look at, and it changes, based on what I'm doing, but having a reference point is really helpful when you're trying to put your own concepts to your medium, and just taking bits and pieces from your heroes. And I encourage like theft in that way. Like
a good artist steals.
A good artist steals. And it's so hard to make art in a vacuum. It's impossible. And I think the more you take from others, that the sort of collage you make out of that can become really personal.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank you all for listening, for watching and listening in. My name is Alexandria Severa with the Humanities program, and this is Jeremiah Myer, upcoming graduate and director of Between Walls and Windows. Thank you.